Hi, welcome to the video. Today we're going to be categorizing the types of intelligence of the 16 personality types. How it's going to work, I've got the 8 types of intelligence, kind of a simplified version down of them. I'm going to be putting each of the 16 personalities and figuring out which one's kind of the most primary intelligence type and discussing other ones I could have gone for. And at the end of the video, I'll wrap it up with figuring out which ones kind of had the most intelligence categories they excelled at, and use that as a basis for deciding which ones I'd say probably are the most intelligent types. Right, let's get into it. INTJs, I've gone for the self category because INTJs, we look into ourselves a lot and we kind of know our own personal strengths and weaknesses. And this means that if we know we are personally good at a task, we will be able to do that confidently. And yeah, that's kind of what really where an INTJ's intelligence lies with this kind of analysis of themselves. I could have gone for the logic potentially because INTJs are very logical with how they approach tasks and can do things very efficiently because of that. But ultimately, it all comes down to an INTJ knows what they're good at, knows what they're bad at. So even if there's a task that involves some logic, some emotional feeling handling, maybe they're not as good at the feeling stuff, but they kind of have the self knowledge of what they're good at, what they're bad at, to make that not as much of a problem, which is kind of why I've gone for that category. With ICPs, I've gone for the nature. It was very tough with this one deciding between nature and logic because ICPs really excel at both. But I've gone with nature category just because of all the types. I definitely think ICP comes out on top in the nature category because if you think of the sort of stereotypical survival scenario, like an apocalypse situation, ICPs are the ones who would survive basically just because they're so good at being outdoors and knowing how things work. I mean, if we look at the picture, ICPs are really good with all the different tools, and that's kind of why they'd do so well in nature intelligence. Whereas there's other types that kind of fit the logic category as well, and that's why I've gone for actually INTP. I put them as purely in the logic category as a dominant thing because INTPs very much look through everything through the lens of intelligence, even emotions, which is kind of insane. So they will always see how does this fit in my logical framework, does it make sense, and they'll be able to rationally sort of analyze everything. And yeah, this is why I put them in the logic category. They're also stereotypically quite good at just general logic related stuff like mathematics, for example. INTPs are kind of often drawn to, and science and stuff like that. So this is why I put them in that category. Next up, ENFJ, they're in the people category because they are very good at interacting with other people and sort of dealing with conflict. They're very conflict avoidant for themselves. They kind of like to fit in a lot of the time. And yeah, they kind of create that group harmony. And that's kind of the best use of an ENFJ's intelligence, I guess, is just how really good they are at being able to understand the context of the situation, how they can resolve that scenario. Yeah, next up in ESTP, I'm putting them in the body category just because, I guess it's like motor skills and stuff. They're very good at doing sports a lot of the time. That's a lot of the common thing they're drawn to, and yeah, they kind of know how the body works and know how to perform and push themselves to the limits. And other types, a lot of intuitives would really struggle in this intelligence category, whereas if you put an ESTP in that sort of situation, they'd probably thrive. With ESTJ, ISTJ, I've put them in the picture category because they're very good at kind of having this sort of memory with introverted sensing of kind of where things are in the physical world, because they're able to sort of they're able to build up this structure in the head of where everything is. So if you lose a thing, ICJ would probably be able to find it quite easily if they have seen it before, and because they're able to just picture it in their head basically, which is why I put them in this category. I could have considered logic for similar reasons for INTJ, but ultimately, in the same way, INTJs have a really good analysis for themselves. ICJs really have a good analysis of the world and the century world. So that's why I've gone for that category. With INFP, I've gone for the nature category. I was very tempted to put them in the words category, but I have gone for nature because that kind of it just fits an INFP so well. Because I mean, if you look at the picture again, INFP, they're in nature, and I don't know if you've ever seen an INFP in nature, but they just kind of they just feel so like comfortable and like at peace with it. Um, and yeah, I think that's why I've gone for that category. But word was tempting because like INFP is also known for being like really good writers, especially creative writing, and getting the words on the page. But I think a sort of natural habitat for INFP is actually just like interacting with nature. So that's why I've gone with that, and they're actually really good at handling that, which is why I've gone for that intelligence category. With ISFP, I'm going to go in music. ISFPs are quite often known as being musicians. A lot of them are drawn to that kind of thing. And it does make sense because it's a way for them to express their feelings through the sensory world. So if you think the introverted feeling function, and then that's being expressed through the extroverted sensing, music playing. And then ESFJ, I'm going to put them in the nature category as well, in a slightly different way to the ISTP and INFP, because if you think about it in terms of context of like dealing with, for example, ingredients, then an ESFJ is going to be very good at actually working out, okay, what does this ingredient do? How can I like put it in a recipe, whatever? If you look at making a cake, whatever, and ESFJs really thrive in that sort of modern kind of context of using nature for like interacting with stuff, like cooking. In TPs, this was one of the most difficult ones so far. I've gone for logic though, even though it very much could have been in the people or word category. I'll explain why. So ENTPs, they're very good at like obviously debating is kind of what they're known for, which definitely involves a lot of interacting with people because you've got to talk to people, and words because you've got to actually come up with what to say. But really, where an ENTP thrives is coming up with the actual arguments themselves and the sort of critical analysis of things. And that's why it's very much logic, because all of it kind of comes back to how good an ENTP is with logic. Whereas the other ones don't. Like, it doesn't come back to that. But with logic, it is just ENTP. Yeah. With ESFP, I've gone with body because very similar to the ESTP. Like, I mean, here they're dancing, so like they're very good at dealing with the physical sensory world. That is where they thrive. Definitely compared to some of the introverts, intuitives, who just don't like interact with the world much. Yeah. With ENFPs, I've gone with the word categories. Like ENFPs are kind of storytellers, but like they can tell stories real time because they're so good at coming up with things on the go. And like an ENFP is going to be able to just like come up with a joke, and everything flows really well with the ENFP. They can just always come up with a thing to say. So that's why I've gone with the words category. With ISFJ, I've gone with the music category because like less so creating music than the ISFP, because often ISFJs struggle with like coming up with creative new stuff because of that inferior extroverted intuition function. But actually like appreciating music and kind of come up with like almost a music library in the head. And ISFJ is really good at sort of accumulating that sort of knowledge. And yeah, that's why I've gone with music category. With INFJ, okay, this one was very, very difficult for me because there's so many it could have potentially been, but I've gone with people category. So the ones I was considering for INFJ were the logic category and the self category as well, because basically INFJs, they're very good at doing the same level of introspection as an INTJ. They look at themselves a lot and like understand themselves, but at the end of the day, they are very much involved with people and how people interact with each other. They might do it less like in the actual world than an ENFJ would do, but they're very much trying to like subtly make people get along, um, even if it's not as much out in the world as an ENFJ would do. But yeah, they also at the same time, an INFJ is also quite logical. They have that introverted thinking child function, so like that's a thing they're actually surprisingly like incredible at if you actually get down to how it works, because an INFJ will actually have a logical basis for all the things, which is pretty cool to see. And yeah, that's why I've gone with people category though, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to how people interact with the INFJ. With ENTJ, I've also gone with people, but for very, very different reasons to the ENFJ and INFJ. Their sort of leadership style, I suppose, is quite like they have the motivation, what they want to get done, and everyone sort of follows along because it's so well executed plan, so well thought out, that they will go and it will kind of work. And they have such confidence when they sort of interact with people that that's kind of how people just follow along. With ESTJ, I've gone with logic because they are very, very consistent with how they do logic, you know, keeping rules and like if things make sense based off the rules. And yeah, the consistency with that can, as frustrating as it sometimes be, it is helpful. And yeah, that logical intelligence is why I put them in that category. Okay, now for the bit of the video you've probably clicked on it for. The most intelligent type, I probably would say, based off this, is the INFJ, because they have so many like different categories that they could fit into, and not only that, but they excel at the different categories. They don't really have much of a weakness when it comes to a lot of these categories. I'd say the one I'd probably say an INFJ probably wouldn't excel at is the body one, just because they're an intuitive dominant type. But you know, with like picture, they're very good at potentially visualizing stuff with their introverted intuition. You know, with nature, they potentially interact quite well with that, and like the empathy, understanding like how to care for nature and stuff. Um, Probably less so music because it can often be quite um, extroverted, sensing related with like interacting with it. But I guess they can look into sort of the meaning behind it and understand that side of things and look at the patterns within it. And yeah, that's why I've gone for them as the most intelligent type. Second, I'd say was ENTP because they had quite a lot that they can do with the logic and words and people. It does. They are quite good with sort of combining them together. And I guess you could argue like the intelligence is the ability to excel in the categories and then combine them together. And then third, I'd put nature and then ISTP because they got nature and logic. Just they're so strong in these categories. Um, and yeah, they are just very good at a lot of different things. And yeah, like logic is, I guess, the conventional like what people see as intelligence, but I guess this has shown that there are quite a lot of different lenses to view intelligence by. But yeah, that's kind of my tier ranking. So hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to. Let me know if you have any recommendations, and hopefully I will see you next time. Yeah, there's a lot of videos you should probably check out, tier rankings.